Ladies, gentlemen, and Spiritborn of all ages, Season 10 lands in Diablo 4 in a bit over 24 hours from the time of this video going up, and if you're looking to play the season and looking to do so as a Spiritborn, you may have some ideas of what you want to do at max level and work towards an endgame, but most people don't spend too much time thinking very hard about how they're going to be getting to that point. So today we're going to talk about my planned leveling build for Spiritborn this season, as I am playing it this season, and this is what I'm going to be using to try and get to the endgame as quickly and comfortably as possible. The main core focus of this leveling build then is going to be on Storm Feathers, which are the damage source created by the Eagle primary Spirit Hall whenever you evade. The scaling on these is really strong for early game, and so even though you can't spam evade, we will build in a way where you have some damage in between the evades, but the evade itself is your big burst that will deck down any larger enemies, and it's worth mentioning that the footage that you're watching is me using a very similar leveling build in Season 9. It has some minor variations since then in the Season 10 version, but very similar setup to show you what it should look like actively in footage while you're leveling for Season 10. That said, let's get into it with the skill tree today, with the note that we will be reorganizing your skills when you hit level 15, as that's when we unlock the Spirit Hall mechanic, which is pretty major. So we essentially are going to be building one way until level 15, then we hard pivot into Eagle stuff. First up then, we want to pick up Rock Splitter and its enhancement for the simple reason that these have the highest vigor generation ability this early, which lets us use our core skills more often. Next points go into Crushing Hand. This literally had its base damage doubled going into this season. It's now 100% weapon damage for each of the 2 pops of damage at its base, meaning alongside being relatively high AoE due to the animation that it has, anything caught in the middle will get clobbered pretty hard. We also grab Enhanced Crushing Hand for barrier gained for a percentage of the damage dealt, and then the next row of enhancements doesn't actually help us get any actual damage increases off of it, so instead we pivot into passives. 2 points into Vigorous, just for increased vigor generation after we use a core skill, and this unlocks our next cluster, so we're going to be picking up Ravager for Ferocity, which is stacks of attack speed increase, as well as bonus strikes on our attacks. We grab the enhancement from this for increased duration from kills while this is active, and then we grab Measured Ravager as well, which makes our core skill leap to enemies while active, as well as increasing our resource generation by a fair amount while the skill is active, letting us use Crushing Hand more often and more effectively. Then normally, because we're leveling, we would use this opportunity to pick up a movement skill, but this season the best leveling methods are going to involve a ton of Helltides, which are generally more constant combat, and so I actually am going to be preferring going with some grouping up potential with Vortex, as well as its enhancement for bonus damage on the follow-up skill after using it, and then Measured Vortex for damage increase due to our barrier generation from Crushing Hand. Next, we're going to be picking up Armored Hide as a defensive skill, mostly for the enhancement here that gives us maximum resolve stacks added to ourselves when triggered. And this is when we round back to the Rampant Crushing Hand upgrade for increased damage done per resolve stack that you have. After that, we're going to be putting our next 4 points into Crushing Hand itself to increase the damage of this skill at a base level, as it's going to be the majority of our damage at this point, after which we're going to be picking up Scourge, as well as its enhancement, and the main reason for this is it gives us a way to gain some burst damage during the active window for larger enemies, and Reinforced Scourge gives us a ton of vigor generation whenever we use the skill as well for even more burst capability. Then 1 point into the Potent passive, which stacks damage increases against enemies the more that we hit them with our Jaguar skills, and this is going to be coming from Ravager being active and the bonus hits that that gives, which will stack this up on enemies. That point is the one that unlocks the ultimate node cluster. Here we're going to be grabbing the Hunter as our ultimate, as it's just the most reliable ultimate, especially while leveling. We pick up the enhancement for overfilling our Ferocity stacks and increase damage to injured enemies, Exalted Hunter as well for a chance to reset the cooldown when you get kills during the duration, and that should be right where you hit level 15 if you have all of your renowned skill points. This means that it's now time to reshuffle everything that we've done here because of the Spirit Hall unlocks. Once you have the Spirit Hall unlocks, then you want to pick the Eagle primary Spirit Hall. We reset our skill tree, and I'll go through the first 26 points pretty quickly this time. Thunderspike as well as its enhancement, and then also Accelerated Thunderspike. The reason for this is Thunderspike's third hit reduces evade cooldown. Our evade procs a bunch of damage, so that's what we want to maximize. The Accelerated enhancement also lets us apply vulnerable to enemies using this too, which is very useful, especially in combination with the key passive we'll eventually be taking. Then we're going to be taking Crushing Hand as well as its enhancement and Rampant Crushing Hand for the resolve scaling, but we mostly just take this so we have an on-demand Guerrilla skill to use for one of our legendary aspects to activate. The majority of our rotation will either be evading to trigger Storm Feathers or just using Thunderspike manually to recover our evade cooldown. We are then going to be be grabbing Soar for a pure movement ability, as you don't really need the pull-in effect from Vortex with the way that Evade and the Storm Feathers work, which are auto-aiming feathers at any enemy on your screen. We also take Enhanced Soar for a guaranteed crit on the next hit after an enemy is hit by this attack, but more importantly, the part where you get a movement speed increase if it doesn't hit any enemies, as we are mostly going to be using Soar to speed up traversal itself, so there will be frequent opportunities to not hit enemies and give us the movement speed increase. We then also grab Measured Soar for 4 seconds of Unstoppable after using this, and this lets us choose whether to use this for movement speed or to save it for Unstoppable in combat depending on the situation. We then take 2 ranks of the Mirage passive for dodge chance while evading and crit chance after a successful dodge, which also is enough to unlock the next cluster. Here we're going to be grabbing Armored Hide as well as its enhancement for the resolve generation. Then we're going to be picking up Counterattack, which gives passive dodge chance and retaliations on dodges, which helps trigger Mirage's bonus crit chance from the earlier passive. But also the active version of the skill guarantees dodges for a short period, which means that you can use it for guaranteed procs of the Mirage passive. We then also grab the enhancement for this just so we can take Reinforced Counterattack, which gives us just passive increased crit damage for every enemy that is close to us. This unlocks our next cluster once again, inside of which we actually want a few passives, 1 rank in Brilliance for Eagle skill damage scaling off of our movement speed, which lets us put 3 points into Acceleration. This importantly gives us 1 bonus evade charge, which helps with managing our Storm Feathers, but also it increases all Eagle skill damage done, which includes the Storm Feathers themselves, and for a short duration after using either a mobility skill or evading. We then round back to 2 points into Brilliance to finish that one off, get the rest of the ranks, 1 point into the Focal Point passive up here, just as a gateway for some more passives that we will be grabbing later, but not quite yet, because that's what we need to unlock our ultimate skill cluster. So let's jump over there, pick up the Hunter and both of its enhancements for a frequently usable strong ultimate skill that gives us increased damage to injured enemies consistently, and has a reasonably high chance of resetting its own cooldown if you are actively getting kills. We then grab 3 ranks of the Resolution passive over here. This gives us increased damage against elite enemies after you use an ultimate. We use our ultimate pretty frequently, so this is pretty constantly active, and elite enemies are the majority of anything that's actually dangerous, so this is very useful. 1 rank into Sustenance, mostly just as a gateway to let us put 3 points into the Intricacy passive. This lets us recast our most recently used skill 3 times after we've used an ultimate. The main way that I use this is to fly around the battlefield with 3 Soar charges specifically, use your Soar, then use your ultimate, then evade to kill the pack, then you can just fling yourself into the distance with multiple Soars in a row to find the next group of enemies. But for any tougher fights, you could use this either to trigger Armored Hide multiple times or Counterattack multiple times for those bonuses. With that, we unlock our key passives as well, and we're going to be taking Vital Strikes. Storm Feathers makes enemies vulnerable, our Thunderspike during evades makes enemies vulnerable, and if an enemy gets hit by multiple Storm Feathers in a row, you proc this effect on repeat for a load of bonus damage. Simple as that. We then put 1 point into Spiritual Attunement, mostly just as a gateway to let us put 3 points into the Supremacy passive, which is very, very important. This gives us a stacking damage increase buff for any kills that we get during our ultimate skill duration, but this also gives a flat amount to the stacks when our ultimate skill ends. And the Hunter ultimate, specifically, especially at this stage of the game, is the most frequently ending, most frequently usable ultimate, so you can use that to get a lot of stacks of this buff active even while you're leveling, which improves all damage you deal by quite a large amount. We then going to be rounding back to put 3 points into the Apex passive over here for bonus damage against vulnerable enemies, and this is doubled against elite enemies. We grab 3 ranks of Diminishment for reduced damage taken from vulnerable enemies as well. We grab 3 ranks of Unrestrained Power over here for bonus damage while we are unhindered or unstoppable. We have Unstoppable for 4 seconds after we use Soar. We have a combo that lets us use Soar multiple times in a row pretty frequently, so this is all a really nice sort of synergy to give us a general damage increase. We then want to grab 1 rank of Patient Guard over here for the 10% block chance, but also this lets us put 3 points into the Auspicious passive for passive barrier generation. This affects which legendaries we can get proper use out of, so it is quite useful. We then round back down for Initiative to get the final 3 ranks into here, which gives us more sources of Unstoppable, 6 seconds of Unstoppable after we use an ultimate. We will again be using our ultimate very, very frequently, so this will be active a bunch, which helps us get even more damage boost from the passive that we have that gives us bonus damage while unstoppable, and just being unstoppable is very comfortable in general. general. We then stick the remaining 4 points into the Hunter to get it to max ranks, both for reduced cooldown and to unlock the execute effect on non-boss enemies. We then want to put 1 point into Endurance, mostly just to let us put 3 points into Perseverance for extra damage reduction per stack of resolve we have. Then we also pick up Reinforced Armored Hide for increased block damage negation too. We're then going to be grabbing our remaining rank of Mirage over here for increased dodge chance while evading and increased crit chance after we dodge. And then just to finish off with survivability, we're going to be grabbing 3 points into Resilient down here for increased maximum health consistently because of our Guerrilla skill usage. Then for our last 4 points, you would want to put 1 point definitely into Fueled for life on kill. Then your last 3 points can either go 2 more into Fueled to get it to 3 ranks and then 1 into Anti-Venom, or you could just do a full 3 ranks into Anti-Venom depending on your stats and your worries related to poison damage. That does it for our skill tree then, so let's talk about our Spirit Hall choices, and it should be pretty clear from the way I've been speaking that we are taking Eagle primary Spirit Hall choice. This gives you Storm Feathers whenever you evade after using an Eagle skill, which is all skills now because of course has the primary Spirit Hall bonus. We then also take Eagle secondary bonus. You stack up a crit chance increased buff depending on how quickly you move. Then after you get a crit, you will keep that bonus active for 4 seconds before it resets and needs to be built up again. This works great within our setup, high mobility, and we have some crit chance baked in through Mirage, but this helps us crit way more often and get the proper bonus from reinforced counterattack as a result. Moving on then, let's talk about our seasonal power choices, which are the Chaos perks. Your absolute ideal choices of these will probably not be available early, but without knowing the exact order that everything can be unlocked, the best that I can do is tell you what the ideal choices would be. Alacrity is a Spiritborn specific Chaos perk. Basic skills gain attack speed, dash range, and the third attack effect happens every second attack instead. This importantly means we get our evade cooldown reduced way more frequently, which then leads to a massive spike in damage output because we can use our Storm Feathers more often. Accelerating Chaos is another magic Chaos perk, so lower rarity, meaning that it should be easier to get early, and this is simply lucky hit chance for bonus damage as a chaotic burst. This also reduces an active cooldown when it procs, so just nice bonus damage and cooldown management. Then for your other 2 slots, they are tied together pretty tightly. Marred Guard locks you to 50% maximum life, but gives you increased maximum resistance, increased armor, which is the big deal for us here, and then increased barrier and fortified generation. Then for our unique power, the ideal option would be a Beast Cornered. For every 10% life you are missing, you gain increased damage and damage reduction, and spending resources does drain your life, but we very rarely actually spend resources, so no real negative there. But this combined with Marred Guard means that you will at least have 5 stacks of this buff active at all times. Past that, we've got Legendary Aspect recommendations. This is a little bit limited due to the way that Legendaries, well, leveling works. You don't want to spend too many resources that can help you out getting into proper builds when you hit endgame if you are swapping out most of your equipment slots very often, which you will be while leveling, which makes it hard to justify making them legendary. But the main exception is your jewelry slots. Your amulet and your rings don't make you suffer much by having them be underleveled, and the legendary effects that you can put on them more than make up for it in those slots. That said, on your amulet, I absolutely recommend Unyielding Hits if you can find this. This one isn't one that you can force guaranteed be added to your codex, sadly, from completing a dungeon, but it is just such a wildly powerful effect when you have it, giving you increased base weapon damage that scales off of your armor amount. While leveling, your weapon damage is so disproportionately low compared to the amount of armor you are able to get, and so this means the moment that you have this, you can double your damage instantly, if not even more than that, especially if you have the Marred Guard legendary Chaos perk we just talked about that gives a general armor increase multiplier as well. Your second aspect should be Conceited. The simple reason is we will always have a barrier active either through the Auspicious passive or through occasional use of Crushing Hand, and so this is just a general damage increase that will be constantly active, but this is also an aspect that you cannot manually unlock to add to your codex. You are relying purely on RNG for it. But the build is strong enough that with 0 legendaries even, you would fly through leveling regardless. This just makes it even stronger. This also applies to our third ideal legendary, which is going to be the Vehement Brawler legendary. No dedicated drop source for this, but casting an ultimate skill increases all damage that you deal, as well as increased skill ranks for our ultimate, which mostly results in a lower cooldown, which is very, very useful. As for tempering effects, I wouldn't put too much effort into tempering while leveling, but if you are going to be just insisting on doing so, for your weapon temper, I would recommend primary Spirit Hall potency increase. This just straight up increases our main damage source by a notable amount, and then for offensive tempers, if you again insist on doing that, even though I don't recommend that you put that many resources into it, it, you would want to use Storm Feather Potency for your offensive temper slots. For runes, if you get them all leveling, I won't go over any legendary runes, of course, we will stick to the lower rarity ones. The Sem rune gives Offering when you evade, and we tie that to the Gar rune for increased crit chance, which is lovely. This results in tons of extra crit chance, and more crits means more damage. The Neo rare rune gives you Offering if you can avoid taking actual damage for 2 seconds, which we then use to trigger the Cax rune, which makes our non-basic or defensive skills spend all of our resource to give us a general 100% damage boost for 1 second. We don't actually rely on our resource to deal damage, and the damage bonus from this does affect our Storm Feathers, so it's a pretty perfect choice for us. After that, we've got our Mercenary choice for this one as well, and mostly it will depend on if you have the unyielding hits aspect or not, but if you do, you will get a lot of value out of Rahir specifically, and going immediately down the left path here for the Rahir's Guard passive, which is just a generic armor increase, which is lovely for pairing with unyielding hits. And then for your reinforcement choice, you want Varyana with the Earthbreaker skill, cast whenever she can, just for a little bit of free extra crowd control. Finally, then we have our first 28 Paragon points as well, just for an idea of where to put those as you first reaching maximum level, and before you start working towards your proper endgame build. First, we want to head up to the Prime Rare node on the right side here, picking up the rare nodes around it as well, as they're quite useful. This gives us bonus damage and maximum life, which is just generally very good. We then want to get to the actual glyph socket itself, taking the path that will give us the most dexterity as our main scaling stat, and once we have this, the ideal actual glyph you'd have to put inside this would be the Talon glyph if you do have it already this early, but at this stage you're likely to only have like 1 or 2 glyphs, so make the best out of what you got. From here you would want to put in the points required to activate the glyph. This would be dexterity for Talon, so we'd want to pick up some extra dexterity to activate it, such as like this, just to make sure that we can actually activate the effect. Then you want to pick up the other rare node in the areas as well, because the rare nodes are quite useful. And then for your final little bit of pointage, you can move towards exiting the board right out of the top, and if you are going to continue this forwards in this exact same setup, the next board you would put on is Viscous Shield. However, I would generally recommend looking into proper, more endgame builds and shifting things up once you've reached this point. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Your Spiritborn leveling build for Season 10, Storm Feather and Evade heavy all over the place, which should transition quite nicely into a very solid farming build once you reach the endgame. Evade builds in the endgame won't be the peak of power that Spiritborn can reach this season, but they will likely be the peak of speed farming, and speed farming is what you need to be able to do most to get the equipment and the power required to use the proper highest damage builds. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and I hope you enjoy using this for yourself too in-game, as well when the season launches. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.